Danse, welcome to Soul Medicine, Ancient Psychologies for Wellness. I am your host, Dr. Carly Fellner, psychologist and member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. As always, feel free to pick up what fits for you and to leave what doesn't. I'm just here to present a different way of understanding mental health and wellness. This podcast is not intended to provide or take the place of professional advice. If you or someone you know is in need of mental health supports, please reach out to one of the many resources available in your area or to a trusted professional. All details and potentially identifying information about mental work, people who I've worked with, have been changed to maintain their anonymity and privacy. I'm really excited to have Stephanie Tipple join us on Soul Medicine today. Stephanie and I first met when I was her master's program supervisor at the University of Calgary and have since worked together in many capacities through our mutual work with Indigenous focusing oriented therapy and at maskihkiy. Stephanie is a Mi'kmaq woman from the Bay of Islands, Newfoundland, whose work is reshaping how we understand wellness, trauma, and relationality in the therapeutic space. Stephanie is a doctoral candidate in the counseling psychology program at the University of Calgary and will soon be completing her internship with the Sioux Lookout First Nations Health Authority. As a Canadian certified counselor with a specialization in complex trauma and sexual violence, Stephanie integrates Indigenous approaches to therapy and wellness into her practice. She practices from an Indigenous focusing oriented therapy approach, which is rooted in land-based, genocide-informed principles and deeply attuned to the relational wisdom of the body. Stephanie is a passionate advocate for equity-based practices, wherein her practice also integrates feminist and anti-oppressive values. She is committed to supporting individuals and communities on their journeys to wellness, fostering survivance and empowerment through genocide-informed care. Stephanie is also trained as a coach for the Indigenous focusing-oriented therapy and complex trauma program, as well as a facilitator of Indigenous tools for living. Stephanie is also currently a member of the Maskihkiy Wellness Advisory Council. I'm super excited to have Stephanie Tipple with us today. We've worked together for many years now in various different capacities. I'll turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'll just introduce myself formally. Gwe Ninda Luisi Stephanie Tipple. My name is Stephanie Tipple. My spirit name is Eagle Woman, and I am Mi'kmaq from the Bay of Islands, Newfoundland. My family is of mixed ancestry. I have Mi'kmaq ancestry on my mother's side and Irish English ancestry on my father's side. I am currently certified as a CCC in Alberta. And I'm working at Calgary Communities Against Sexual Abuse, as well as doing some work with you in Maskihkiy and finishing my dissertation.
Awesome. So we were having a conversation last night where you were talking a bit about wrapping up your work with where you're at now and some of the conversations that were coming up about, I'll call it the collective self in relation, because that's how I always think about it. But I'm interested to hear about your perspectives today.
I'm going on my internship in the next couple months, and as I finish up my work at CASA, I started to hear from some of my clients, I don't know if it's a disappointment, a frustration, all of the things of how do I find a therapist that aligns with my worldview, with my approach, and honors that connection to more than just the human in the room. Because the way that I work is I know that if you're my client, there's more than just you sitting in the room there, that there's all your relatives that are coming through. And there are people that I work with that come from different beliefs, come from different backgrounds, but it all is that same thread of a whole web of relations that comes into the room. As I'm working with people and we're wrapping up, they're having a hard time of like, how do I find someone that can honor that side of me? And also that shame that comes with that, because there's a lot of shame that can come, or embarrassment, judgment of saying, I am connecting with my spirit guides right now, or whatever it is that they're bringing into the space. I'm connecting with my ancestors, and people don't feel comfortable to share that in a lot of spaces because they're judged, it's dismissed. Some people will acknowledge it, but they don't really honor and respect the truth in it. And so that to me is the important piece in the work, is honoring the truth of those connections, whatever those connections are for people. What I'm hearing is that there are not a lot of spaces that are safe for people like that.
Have you had people share experiences with you before about working with therapists where they felt really invalidated
Yes, very much. What comes to mind right now is one particular woman I was working with, and she said, anytime culture, like spiritual beliefs, practices, tradition, even just race in general, came into the room, she could see the panic on her therapist's face of like, how do I address this? I don't know what to say. I've also had people who have blatantly been dismissed and they might bring it up and it's just kind of tossed to the side and then they go with whatever their worldview or their approach to therapy is without acknowledging the profound impact that that connection, that relation that's coming forward has in the session itself. If I think about the work that I do with so many people I work with, you know, there's so much, and I'll say the word medicine, but when I say medicine, it's anything that's helpful to them. There's so much medicine that comes with those connections that we wouldn't even be able to explore had we not invited and honored those connections in the room.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So do you have an example of how that's shown up in the therapeutic space before?
I think about one example in particular where there was a woman that I was working with and her mother showed up. She had shared that she had been in other therapies where she might, like as a therapist, you know, things like the two chair technique, things where you
Yeah.
imagine that you're talking to somebody in connection with. And she had kind of had that experience before. And what was different for her about our session is that her mother actually was in the room. It's not a hypothetical. I've been sharing this a lot lately is the work that we do is not hypothetical. It's not that we're imagining what would your mother say right now or what would you say to your mother. It's actually happening in the room. And so that's something that did stand out to a woman that I was working with. And she had brought this up actually towards the end of our therapy. And I would say that this moment happened more towards the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always at the end when they're kind of reflecting on everything that they've gone through and the growth and all of these things that stood out and things that I wouldn't even think really make a difference. But that's kind of one example that comes to mind of her mother showing up in the room and her mother was passed. So her mother is there spiritually, metaphysically, and she felt the hug from her mother. She felt her mother there, even though her mother is no longer on this earth.
Yeah. I know for me, that was like such a paradigm shift when I was introduced to Inuak indigenous psychologies, and of course also living that life and becoming immersed in my Inuit indigenous culture and all of that, and realizing how much undoing I had to do of all this programming that we're imagining, or it's a visualization, and it's none of that. It's truly real. My Nana, my grandmother, passed shortly before I moved away on internship to Minnesota. It was like she literally passed away 10 days before I was moving. And it was a few months later, like early in that fall, I was in Minnesota. I didn't know a lot of people, but I had this dream that I was at Lake Superior and I was like, okay, I need to go there. And I went there and I went and put some offerings in the water. And I was just like, you know, I was asking for help with this grief because I had this tremendous grief. Like my Nana was like another parent to me. I was really, really close with her. And she's also the person I would say who had the biggest influence on my spirituality and was sharing so much of our teachings, like our Inuit indigenous teachings from that side of our family. And I lost her at a critical time where I was like really connecting. I was really learning. And so I was just overwhelmed with grief. So I went to the water and then I was putting my offering in and just praying there. And then I looked up in the sky and the sky was just clear blue, except for these clouds that looked like an angel. You know, I don't even use the word angel usually, but it looked like an angel. And I remember having this moment of like, Nana, like I just knew it was her. And I heard this message, I'm free. Ultimately, what took her life was cancer. And the last few years of her life, she really was dealing with a lot of illness and pain and suffering. And she also had a long life where she dealt with a lot of difficulty. And so it was this message of I'm free now. Like I am free. For her, that was liberation. And it fundamentally shifted my experience with my grief. At the same time, it was really hard for me to believe. Even in that moment, I'm so glad I took a picture of it because this other side of my brain was like, it's not real. You're making that up. You're imagining that's what the clouds look like, but it's so real. And it was a true visit and a true message. And I'm glad I honored that over time because it takes a lot to deprogram the ways we've been taught.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And as you were saying that, it kind of made me think of that the reality that we don't allow ourselves to believe that because of the society that we live in that tells us that it's not true, or that we have to question it, we have to critically examine it. What are the, I don't know, the weather that caused those clouds to form? And the reality is, no, that came to you for a reason, and that really happened. And as I'm finishing up my dissertation, that's a piece in the findings, is really honoring the truth in that. And it took me a long time to honor the truth in those experiences. And even sometimes now, I kind of had a similar experience a few weeks ago when I was camping, and there was this butterfly that kept coming, and I knew right away it was my aunt. And I kept being like, no, it's just a butterfly that came. And then she kept coming back until I finally acknowledged her. And then she was like, thank you, I'm here, acknowledge me. And I didn't even tell my partner. And I kept pointing out this butterfly, but I never did tell him what happened internally to me. And I don't know why. There's still that part of me that sometimes needs to put that aside, of like, he's not going to judge me because he knows this truth too. But we're just programmed to feel embarrassed or ashamed. I've had people make fun of me for saying stuff like that. And that's why I find it so important in the work that I do to honor that and to create a space where people can be open about those truths, because even the people that deny it, I can guarantee they have those experiences too.
Yeah.
And they know the truth in it.
Yeah.
They probably don't let themselves fully sit in it and believe it, but they do know it.
Yeah. Somehow I still have this memory of being in like grade 6 or 7 and learning about what was considered reality, learning science, and that for something to be real, it needs to be all of these things, like measurable, quantifiable, all this stuff. And it's funny because I actually like retained that memory from my childhood about learning, oh, so all of this other stuff isn't real. Like I actually remember, oh, imagination is just imagination. It's very patronized.
Yeah, exactly.
From a colonial paradigm. It's fake. It's not real. This came up in my dissertation work years ago, was the ways that our Inuit Indigenous ways of knowing have actually been pathologized as being crazy. If you look at cognitive behavioral therapy as one example, there's more paradigms that we could talk about, but the list of irrational thoughts or distorted thinking, something like magical thinking, it's very easy for our worldviews and all of the unseen to actually be turned into a pathology of like, oh, that's a distorted thought. That's irrational thinking. That's not reality, because according to this paradigm, this is what reality is. And it's just so important for people to remember that that's just one worldview, just one among, millions at least, if not more. And to not give it all that authority, because I know that happens. And even for myself, I've had that experience. Am I crazy? I know this sounds crazy. And I've had to work to stop saying that, because me saying that continues to perpetuate that system of thinking. It's like, no, it's not crazy. It's actually that knowledge is coming to us. The dreams, these visits, or like you're talking about in the therapy session, when some relation is coming through, knowing that that is real. It's very, very real. And we need our folks who are working in the psi disciplines and mental health fields overall to know that this is real. It's not knowledge to be patronized or put down, or I don't believe that, but that's their belief. Because again, you're still saying, but it's not real. It's a belief. It's not reality, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's so funny because sometimes in the work that I do, we kind of need to put our brains aside. With so many people I work with, it's kind of like, okay, let's put that piece aside, and what is true to you right now, what's showing up in your body. I'll go back to the example of the butterfly. I knew right away it was my aunt. It's that first instinct of, this is what it is. The same with the story of your grandmother. You knew that this was your grandmother and the message that came through. But you could go through all the reasons in your head of why that's not the case. So sometimes we need to put our brain aside for a minute and just trust what the body's telling us, what that relation is telling us, because we can explain it in so many ways, because that's what people are taught. We're conditioned to have to explain things, to think logically about things, when the reality is it's true. It's coming through right now. It's that first initial message that comes to you. So I'm always encouraging people to trust that first thing that comes to you. If something comes up and your initial reaction is, oh, that's my aunt. Hi, Ricky. That's the truth, not all of the other things. So,
Yeah, absolutely. I have this conversation with my mind. Thank you for your feedback.
yes.
You know, but it's just sort of retraining it because, again, it's a programming that's happened from a really young age, at least when we're raised in this particular North American dominating society. There's a lot of valuable things that we learn as well. And we don't want to be learning it at the expense of this whole universe of knowledge and relationships and wisdom and medicine. Like, even that simple story I shared about my Nana, like I say, that was a fundamental shift in my grief. That from that moment, because I accepted it, even though I fought it for a little bit and tried not to, and tried to be like, no, that's, I couldn't deny it. Like, I have that picture. My sister even printed out a picture of it, and I have it framed in my house.
I've seen it before. I know the picture you're talking about.
Yeah, right. And it's like no, you can't logic this away, right? It's real. And I'm so grateful that I ultimately accepted it, because that is a grief that to this day I could have still been suffering and struggling with had I not opened myself to accept what my Nana was sharing with me, which was, I'm free and I am good and I am happy and I'm still with you. I'm still here. I'm always going to be here. And having that comfort and knowing we are still in relationship, our relationship has just changed, because I certainly grew up, again, this sort of like dominating Euro-Western belief that, like, oh, when you die, you die.
Right.
And the person's gone. And it's like, no, we still have a relationship. That relationship is continuing. And I know that we still have that relationship, and that she's gonna be there for me if and when I need her. And it's so powerful to know that.
And to know that you're never alone, even when you might feel alone. And because so many of us do, even if we think about the pandemic that we went through, so many of us felt alone, but we're never truly alone in those times. And as you were saying that, it also brought up that reminder of time not being linear, and all time is here now, the past, the present, the future. And one of the really profound experiences for myself, essentially what I was working on in one of the sessions, was my relationship with meat. So I have always kind of been weird about meat, especially like wild game meat, anything that's not bought at a grocery store, which doesn't even make sense because that stuff is probably so much better than all the shit we're getting at the grocery store. But I decided that, like, I was gonna finally work on this relationship that I had with meat. And as I was connecting in with that, what I realized is it actually wasn't even mine at all. It actually belonged to a male ancestor who, as I connected in, this male ancestor came forward, and he was responsible for hunting for the community. And I was getting the sense that there was a shortage of moose, and the food was for the women and children. It wasn't for the men because there wasn't much. So it was for the women and children. And so it was this need, it was this kind of aversion to meat, or this this distance from the meat because it's not for the men. And in that instance, I was connecting with that male ancestor and realizing that none of this is mine. We do those scaling questions, 0 to 10, literally 0 of it was mine. That was 100% all his. I don't even know who this ancestor was. I don't really know where he came through my lineage. And I don't need to know that either. What I know is that I was holding this for him, but I was also able to set that down for him and to let him know that it's okay now. There isn't a shortage. It's okay. We can eat the moose now. We can eat the meat. And that has literally completely shifted my relationship with meat. And if I'm honest, sometimes my head gets in the way of this narrative that I am stuck in, that, oh, I don't like that, but I have no aversion to it. Whereas before, I would literally get kind of sick eating it. Now, sometimes I need to put the brain aside and say, thank you for your feedback, but it's okay now. So it's that reminder that none of that was mine to carry.
Yep.
And so it's just that truth, in that we can I don't like to say the word heal, but we can support and resolve things, wounds that people have crossed over with. I don't even know if he's in my bloodline. Maybe it's not even,
Yeah.
in my bloodline. It's someone in that collective that I'm surrounded by.
That's another one of the things I love so much about Inuak psychology is like indigenous psychologies is that we don't need to know everything. In the dominating Euro settler culture, there's this emphasis on needing to know, needing to be able to explain. And there's just this inherent trust from indigenous perspectives where we know we actually can't know everything. Like there's a huge humility there that there are so many mysteries of the universe that as human beings we can never fully understand when we're in this form, and we are okay with that and we allow that, and all that matters is that medicine is there, right? That's the thing. And with some of this work, I mean, I can certainly say that for myself with people that I've worked with, as well as working through my own stuff. There's things I fundamentally would basically be stuck with if we didn't have this approach, right? Because you're coming at it from such a reduced, narrow perspective of, like, oh, why don't I like wild meat? Or you're trying to like, recondition a response or something like that, and it makes me think of Maureen's thesis work as well, looking at eating disorders, which I want to do an episode with her one day to talk about that perspective. Again, putting aside all this idea about disorder and what's going on with people's eating, and understanding it's often something ancestral there, or some kind of protection, or there's all of these reasons, these purposes for what's showing up, the conversation that's coming through the person's body.
To kind of circle back to how we started this conversation about creating that space in not even the therapy room, this goes beyond that. I also wouldn't have been able to connect with that medicine had my therapist at the time not honored that truth for me too, because my therapist at the time is in that connection with me, like, yeah, this belongs to an ancestor, this is his, helping me to navigate that connection that's showing up in the space, and honoring the truth in that. She wasn't like, oh, what would he say, or like dismissing it in any way.
Yeah.
She knew that that was real as much as I know that's real, and that is what helped to shift that with me. So that's why it's so important that we create those safe spaces for people to be with the truth in that. Because had she not created that space, I might not have came forward with what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
Because you know this as a therapist, you don't know what the heck is going on for me over here unless I'm sharing that with you sometimes, and you might get a sense of it and you might sample it a bit, but I might have kept that to myself. I might not have been able to even go there had she not created that space. So that's why it's so important that we honor the truth and those connections that come forward.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because I do a lot of professional development work with psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers, different mental health professionals. And I always have this sort of like guilty admission or something of, I personally will not go see a psychologist out in the public. I just won't.
Right.
When I have something that I need to work through, I know that I personally, I only have time to go and do sessions with someone who practices indigenous psychotherapy, right? Who understands this for this very reason, because I want to get in there. I want to get the medicine, whatever's coming through whoever it's coming through, whether it's ancestors, whether it's a future generation, whether it's the land or animals. I need that space to be there so I can just get the medicine and move forward. That's how I like to work through my own stuff, is just like, I know the medicine is somewhere there. I just want to get to it and go. I don't want to talk about stuff. I don't want to do hypotheticals. I got stuff to do here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So just because I know it's going to be a new concept to some people who are listening, how would you describe the collective self in relation? Maybe go into that a bit.
I'll just share what came to me when I was going through my dissertation, because I'm specifically looking at how we understand and work with all my relations within IFOT specifically, so Indigenous Focusing Oriented Therapy. This knowing that we are surrounded by all of life and land. We are surrounded and in relationship with everything that exists in the world, and within that nonlinear understanding of time. So the past, the present, the future. I know that I am in relationship with my ancestors, with the children that I will have, that I'm in relationship with you that's sitting next to me here in the earth. I'm also in relationship with this chair that I'm sitting on. I'm in relationship with the skirt that I have on, the land that's under my feet. So it's just that understanding that we are in relation to everything that exists within us, outside of us, around us, under us, on top of us, all of the things. And it's not just what's happening now in this present time and world. So that's the understanding to me. And that's always kind of how I envisioned it as I embarked on my own research. You'll have to do this for me at some point. That commissioned art piece of the globe. And we're in there, and there's the whole world. All of life and land is surrounding us.
Yeah. Yeah, I always think of it as a universe of relationships. It's like if each of us was a sun, and it's like this whole universe of everything that's orbiting around us and connected to us. All people, and obviously we have people who are more closely connected to us, where we might feel things more strongly, right? If something's happening in our family, we're going to feel a piece of that, perhaps more strongly than something that's happening in another family. But then again, you can never say for sure,
Right.
Because of whatever those ties are there. I mean, really, the gist is that everything is interconnected, and quantum physics knows this. You know, there are fields within Euro-Western science that know this, that acknowledge this, that show, the entangled particles. Geneva, Switzerland, they're doing something to a particle there, and it's affecting a particle it's entangled with across the globe. And so we know that there are these metaphysical connections that are very, very real, and they do transcend time and space. And we have those experiences, and to not acknowledge them, we are missing so much, right? And this is where I think one of the key pieces of where conventional psychology needs to kind of open up and learn is to not individualize everything. No wonder people feel so alone. They feel so alone in their hurt, in their suffering, in their grief, in their whatever it is. I talked a bit about that in earlier episodes, like my anxiety, my depression, right? We are told and taught that it's all ours.
Yeah.
And that's so much to carry. When we actually take that time and we unlayer, we have this awesome technique that within IFOT of the paper rip and tearing away the pieces gradually that are not ours, and realizing it may only be a small piece or maybe nothing, like you said, that 0 out of 10 in your situation where none of it was yours. And sometimes a bigger piece is yours, but I always say no matter what, it's wonderful knowledge, because if more of it is yours, then you have a bit more control there. If not as much of it is yours, then you can work to help to let that go. And know that as you let that go, whether you're giving something to the land or you're transforming and shifting, healing something, it's helping whoever's it is that you're carrying it for, right? Like we pick up a piece of depression, let's say, for somebody else, and we release that depression into the land, or we shift it, we transform it, we heal it, we change that energy, and it's actually going to have that impact of healing on that person. We are so collective. And right now, with what's happening in the world, we're all experiencing so much as part of that collective, because it's guiding us, right? It's letting us know that it's time for you all to live in ways of greater harmony and balance again. Life doesn't need to be filled with as much hurt and pain and violence, war, all of the things that are going on as it is right now. So many people are experiencing that collective activation. We're seeing so much more sickness, mental illness, all of the things. which again are conversations that are coming forward to say, hey, there's a better way. It's beautiful wisdom in there.
One thing I always remind people from the way that we work, we know that when we see something that's so big, and I'll use your example, like whether it's depression, anxiety, grief, whatever it is, it's often an indication that it's not all yours or it's not all mine. And we're seeing so many big things right now because there's so many horrific things that are happening in the world. I'll even bring in the work that we're doing with the Survivor Circle for reproductive justice. So many women are carrying such big grief. I've heard from so many women that I've worked with, even when we went to the national gathering in Gatineau, the realization that, oh my God, I'm not alone in this. And I thought that this was just me. And I thought that this was all mine. And even some of them don't have that language to say what I'm carrying isn't mine. But we know that, and we can help them to recognize that. And that is such a relief for people to recognize that, oh my God, I'm not messed up, that this isn't even mine, or some of this I'm holding for this person, which is also a really beautiful thing, because if we were to carry all of what we're experiencing, no matter what that experience is, alone, we would probably die under the weight of that. So it's important that we hold it for one another. It's not a thing to be ashamed of or to blame other people for putting their stuff on you. No, there's a reason that we hold this collectively and that we're in this relationship to one another, because we wouldn't be able to do it alone.
Yeah, exactly. And what's awesome is that Indigenous peoples globally have always understood that, right? Like, this is thousands and thousands and thousands of years old wisdom that goes back in everybody's lineage at some point, however long ago their ancestors lived indigenously. There was always that understanding, like we right now are out here in BC to attend some ceremonies, and we were having some conversation of that. There's so much like that collective self in relation, and the people who are committing and undertaking to these particular ceremonies are doing so on behalf of their communities, but also humanity. Like, it's for everyone, and it's incredible the things folks are doing. And I know this is happening in all different parts of the world in different traditions. I mean, there are monks in monasteries who are constantly praying for the world. There's that knowledge, there's that wisdom, understanding the collective self in relation there. When people are undertaking certain ceremonies, where those of us who are supporting what we are sending to them, knowing that what we send to them is helping them to do what they need to do to help the people. Like, it's just beautiful. It's incredible. It's living the whole thing, right?
Yeah. And we all have that, no matter where we come from. I remember you talking about this podcast you were listening to and being cut off at the roots. But we all have those roots to somewhere, and some of us might be cut off earlier, or we might be more disconnected than others, but we all have that. And even if I think about the work that I do at CASA, the majority of my clients are non-Indigenous, but they get it because we all have that collective self in relation. We don't have to be Indigenous to have that connection.
It's so true. That's why I always bring up the land thing. No matter who you are, where you're from, what your ancestry is, you are made of land. You are made of the water. You are made of the plants. You're made of the animals. If you consume meat, like, you are land. The land is you. That is a truth of being a human on this planet that we cannot escape. That interconnectedness is a given. It's a biological given of natural law. And so just by virtue of that, even, right, knowing that we are interconnected.
And the reality is, I've never had one person sit down with me that didn't have that experience. I have never had somebody sit with me and deny the truth in that experience. And it's when it's honored in that space that it comes forward. It's something we know from the work that we do, that we don't bring something into the room, but when it's safe for it to come forward, it will come forward. So again, just circling back to that honoring of the truth in those connections, whether it's in the side disciplines, whether it's in your life when you're talking to your partner or your family or your friends, creating a space where we can live that truth instead of having to continue to hide it or be ashamed of it or put up walls around it.
Yeah, or shut down knowledges that
Yes.
have so much to offer us,
Mm-hmm.
right? What a beautiful return to who we are
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
by nature.
Hi. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you on the next full moon.